After they took I from the bottomless pit, my head was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs.
Hey, what's up, troops? Ops Sgt-Maj with Veterans for Freedom, Jeff Evely, back with you now on this 10th day of November 2023. It's the day before Remembrance Day. It's Friday. I'm wearing my red t-shirt, support the troops, yellow ribbon. That was the in vogue virtue signal that was going on there back in the Afghan war was still on. So I'm trying to bring it back now. It's something that's kind of fallen out of fashion since the Trudeau regime came to power. But we like to bring back the Red Fridays around here just to show some support for our currently serving troops. I got a great show lined up for you guys today. Oh, and just to remind everybody, I know I'm not wearing a poppy. It's not because I don't support veterans, obviously, because I am one. It's because I don't support the Legion, and I wear this pin instead. It's the Infinite Resolve pin of Veterans for Freedom that is more centered around the torch, because I think that John McCrae in his poem in Flanders Fields was really writing about a torch, and the poppies were really more like the backdrop. And that is based on the verses of take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours, so hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not rest, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields. So, and that is also why I say those boys are rolling in their graves right now, because it's our duty to stand on guard for the being the veterans who went before us, who gave their lives for our freedoms. And it's up to all of us to take up their quarrel with the foe, which is, the emancipation of the human race. And we all have a sacred civic duty to safeguard the inheritance that they provided us. So yeah, that's why I prefer the torch. Well, it's more than that. I mean, the Legion is a disgrace. So I have plenty of poppies that I could just put on, just kind of sitting in different boxes in my closet. But not only do I not want to show my support for the Legion by buying a poppy, I don't want to pretend like I'm supporting it by putting on one that I got from a previous year. Hashtag boycott the Legion. Okay, so let's go ahead and say the good mornings before I dive into her here. And we got Mother of the Drummers over on YouTube. First one up on the chat says, good morning, Jeff and Chad. Good morning to you, Mother of the Drummers. Cora says, good morning, all. I'm on time in Alberta. Not going to lie, though. I should probably do some push-ups. Yeah, push-ups are good for you. I did quite a few push-ups here this morning. And that's what I've been doing a lot over the last couple of months because I tore a couple of muscle fibers there in my bicep. So I'm giving it lots of time to heal because I'm an old man now. They say 6 weeks, but it's been longer, and I still feel like I probably should take some more time. So I'm just sticking with the. I don't want to use my dumbbells because I find the grip really having to grip them really kind of exacerbates it. I feel pain around the elbow there, so I'm sticking with push-ups for now, and that's all cool. Push-ups and rings. I have a set of rings here on my chin-up bar. So Darlene is saying, good morning, everyone. Tuning in from New Brunswick. I've shared. Thank you very much, Darlene, because I think I really kind of shit the bed on that one there today. I didn't share it around Facebook groups like I usually do, but I got it out there on Telegram and whatnot. Yeah, I'm trying to line up a few deep subjects here, I think. So it's always a bit of a scramble in the morning, especially when I'm still groggy from my sleep meds. But Mother of the Drummers has given me the hearts. And Cindy says, good morning, Jeff. Hearts, morning, friends. And Cindy, thank you very much, by the way, for the birthday present. My birthday is coming up in a few days, guys. And I got this yesterday. And because I'm basically a big kid, I couldn't wait to open it and see what it was. And it's some mush peanut butter, which is... it's what is psilocybin, 4 grams of psilocybin in that sucker. And man, oh man, do I love me some psilocybin. I think it's pretty great for treating symptoms of depression and playing Mario for hours on end. So thank you very much, Cindy. I do appreciate that so much. It's a beautiful gesture. So okay, and Blory says, good morning, informed Canadians. Yes, good morning to everyone. Why do push-ups if you're early, says Darlene? Well, because push-ups are good for you. And Cora says, because I'm getting fat. Terry is here saying, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Terry. Jan says, good morning to you. Tawny, how you doing, Tawny? Good morning, all, she says, and good morning to you. Oh, there's Wild Bill Radell saying, good morning, champ. Chimo. Chimo right back at you, even though I'm not an engineer. More like an engineering technician. Electronics geek, computer weenie. But yes, good morning to you, Bill. And Tawny says, bearded poppies are what my family wears. Oh, beaded toppies. Bearded. That didn't really make a lot of sense now, did it? Marion says, good morning, all. And Jeff. Tyrone says, good morning, everyone. D. Al says, don't let them down. Okay. Brenda says, good morning, Jeff. Colleen says, good morning, all. And she's also saying, wow, $125,542 Canadian. And I believe that is in reference to Chris Lizak's Give, Send, Go. I'm going to plug that here when we get into the intros. That's really great to see. And Trump is saying good morning, happy birthday, you'll fart. Yeah, I'm going to be 45 in a few days, so I guess I'm getting up there. And Susan, hey, Susan, how you doing? I haven't seen you around in a while. Says good morning to you, Susan. And Leanne is here saying good morning. Give us a triple slashy right back at you. And Cindy says you're welcome. Well, I appreciate it, Cindy. It was pretty awesome. Maybe I'll give that a little try later on and see how it goes. Okay, let's go ahead and dive right into this now. Here's the Veterans for Freedom website. I'm showing you the support fund here. So go to the main page there, click support, and you'll have a couple of different options to choose from. One is to support Veterans for Freedom, help us keep the lights on, support our operational costs, pays for my StreamYard account and the website and things like that. But we also have the Veterans for Freedom Support Fund. So if you click support fund or support there, you'll get this. Answers for Sean is one of the candidates here. Everybody who donates to the fund gets a chance to vote on where the funds go. Answers for Sean is not just an ordinary fundraiser. It is a mission for truth, justice, and accountability. So Sean was a very young boy, hockey player who died of the jabby jab, and his father has been on a mission to get some truth and justice for him. And I believe it's Dr. Peter McCullough has been secured as an expert witness. His father has standing now, so it is going to court. This is positive. This is the kind of thing that I've been talking about. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, but it is our best hope of getting any kind of accountability here is through the courts. And so just, I have multiple administrative reviews on the go. I took some time off there recently. I made 2 appearances in court during that time off, and that is because of some judicial reviews that I filed, and I'm getting disclosure today for one of those. That I'm taking the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission to court over their total dereliction of duty throughout all of this. Okay. Also available for voting this month is Kimberly Newdorf, Canadian wife, mother, and homeschooler of 3 who was recently convicted and fined $7,000 plus costs for organizing 2 peaceful demonstrations against provincial government-imposed restrictions on constitutionally enshrined rights and freedoms. And Sarah Kahunian is, she was one of the first nurses to speak up against the lockdowns at a rally in 2020, and she's the co-founder of Canadian Frontline Nurses. She's been fired from her 2 nursing jobs and under 5 investigations by the CNO. Yes, please, if you like, you can vote to go to any one of these candidates. And you also have the option to have 10% of your donation this month go to support the Operation Trauma Recovery podcast. That's Tango Romeo, Operation Tango Romeo, with Mark Menke as the host. And he's a friend of the program, great guy, and has a great podcast over there. So check him out. Here is the Defend Chris Lydzak. The Give Send Go. It's the goal is $150,000, and they're already up to $125,827 Canadian. So get a piece of that action while it's still open. They're getting there, and my hat's off to these guys. They have been rotting in jail for over 650 days because they won't take the plea deal. They want to get this thing into courts. And apparently, last going off, they weren't even given disclosure. Like the prosecution is basing a lot of their case on certain text messages that they have not disclosed to the defense lawyer. And that is a basic procedural, that is a basic principle of procedural fairness. Oh God, do I have a spammer in the chat here? I think so. Let's see. Go ahead and block that. Oh, it says I lost my connection to the Facebook group, but that doesn't look right. Sometimes I have trouble blocking some of these spammers here, guys. So sorry about that. Yeah, screw off, spammer. All right. So there's Chris Lydzak's things. So yeah, I mean, prosecutorial misconduct, abuse of process, standard this day and age under the Trudeau regime. So please give generously. These guys have gotten ripped off a couple of times already. I'm not sure where. Like, there's been money raised and people rip them off and stuff like that. But apparently, this is being administered by Kevin Watson. So this is the latest effort to find some justice for these guys who've been sitting in the Canadian Gulag Archipelago there for 650 days. Also, check out Awake Freedom TV on Roku. It's a channel on Roku, and we are a show on there. So you can catch us over there on Roku TV as well, if you like. And this is all Canadian free speech type stuff. So by all means, go ahead and check that out if you're on Roku. Okay, here's our philosophy quote for today. And this is something of a modern philosopher who's completely deranged at the present moment. Sam Harris, okay, he has Trump derangement syndrome. I realize. I followed this guy for years before the Trump era, and I used to say that he was the most rational human being on the planet. And then once Trump came along, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, he's just a California liberal. Well, he's not just a California liberal. He has done some really amazing work. I've read, I think, all of his books, actually, and they're all pretty great. Free will didn't really convince me of his arguments, where he was making the argument against the existence of free will. It sounds more like he talks about how you can see these thoughts kind of riling up in the brain on the brain scans and functional MRIs and stuff like that. So we're not really the ones that are pulling the strings. It's happening somewhere in the subconscious. And by the time we become consciously aware of our decisions, it's already been made. I don't think that's it's mostly based on the brain scan, so I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's more like the subconscious washes the conscience over with possibilities, and then we get the chance to decide on the possibilities. So, spammer, go away. Let me see now. All right. So Sam Harris says, pretending to know things that you do not know is the lifeblood of religion. Yeah, I would say that. And when I say that I know something, all I really mean is that I have confirmed it. And in religion, there are a lot of leaps, like the leap of faith. You have to make a logical leap in order to accept a lot of the arguments. They are non sequitorial by nature, and that is the nature of faith. It is the belief in something despite the absence of evidence for the claim, or despite all evidence to the contrary. So I'm addressing a lot of that here because as I've been doing this week, I'm talking about like some of these different conspiracy theories that I've seen going around out there lately. In particular, well, it's more about, let me back this up for a sec. It's really more about the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I see a lot of people in the freedom movement just kind of spewing progressive talking points, commie propaganda points, and so on and so forth that I've shown here before on the program, just how communists they really are. And now I see people going around using these talking points because we have a war involving Israel. So it's disappointing, but it is what it is. And I can't find that spammer. Let me see. But it's disappointing. But I think maybe we just have a little bit of cleaning up to do here in the freedom movement, in terms of like just sort of cleaning up the ranks and getting people a little bit more reality focused. And I'm gonna try and delete this. See, this is where StreamYard really kind of fails me. They don't. I keep getting these glitches every time I try to block one of these spammers. They're really pretty painful. Okay, let's just hope that's the end of it. Okay, yeah, and can you get rid of Alexander Frank? He's a spammer. Yeah, I know, Alexandra Frank. We all see you there, and it's annoying. So go away. Okay, so that's Sam Harris. Here's our meme for the day. This is from Toy Story, the original Toy Story, and you've got the boy, the main character. I don't remember what his name is, but he's dropping Woody after he rips his arm by accident and saying, "I don't want to play with you anymore." And Woody is captioned as the U.S. news media, the boy is captioned as U.S. news media, and Woody is captioned as Ukraine-Russia war. Yeah, that's pretty much the size of it. I mean, nobody's talking about the Ukraine-Russia war anymore. They have a bigger, badder, potentially more volatile World War III type war now, all over the propaganda machine. And let's try and cut through some of that propaganda here today. Okay, so as I've been saying, I think a lot of the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, as much as I hate to call it that, commentary out there in the freedom movement right now, I think a lot of it originates with this, with 9/11 conspiracy theories. I used to say 9/11 truther just sort of out of respect for people because I used to be one. Embarrassingly enough, I did believe that 9/11 was an inside job for a couple of years there in the 2000s. And then, I just looked at the other side of it. I took a deeper dive and I realized where I went wrong, and I learned from it and I grew from it and all that stuff. So now I'm more careful, I'm more skeptical. And the thing is that these claims the 9/11 truthers make, I mean, they're very careful not to really make any direct claims too. That's another thing. It's a bit disingenuous. And they just kind of ask questions. And if you can't answer the question, well, then it was an inside job. And that seems to be an article of faith. That's what the faithful tend to do. What you can't explain abiogenesis, or you can't explain, the formation of multicellular life. Oh, well, then it was magic. It was my magical sky daddy. It must have been. And I'm like, well, no, that's not a logical argument at all. That's a kind of cultist belief. That's the way the cults work. And I see a lot of that going around in the 9/11 truther movement. A lot of shifting of the goalposts and so on and so forth. I've had some interactions with multiple people over the course of the last month too, in person, and that's what I find they do. I started out this week on Tuesday showing a really well done video about the collapse of World Trade Center 7. That explains it very well, why it actually fell. It was because of the long fire that just how long it burned, and the steel weakened under the fire. And that's the thing, is everybody's always saying, oh, you think that fire melts steel beams? No, nobody ever said that. That was not in the NIS report. What they said is that the steel weakened, and it loses about 50% of its strength at around, I think, 1,000 degrees or 1,100 degrees. Anyway, let's watch this video. And this is one on World Trade Center 1 and 2. Pretty well done. It's about 10 minutes long. So here we go.
Each tower is made up of 236 steel columns. They stand just 26 inches apart around the perimeter. More than 43,000 windows complete the outer skin. Inside, steel plates stretch across the void, topped with nearly 1 million tons of concrete to create 110 floors. The North Tower is crowned with a final feature, a 360-foot communications mast. Now they have a new task, to make this outer skin strong enough to support the weight of the tower. The Twin Towers' external skin goes up first. 59 steel columns per side, each just 14 inches wide. They bear most of the tower's weight. In the center of each tower sits a core of 47 steel columns to give the tower extra rigidity. Thin steel plates 60 feet wide bridge the gap, connecting the inner and outer columns, anchoring the entire structure together and creating the vast open floor plans. It's a futuristic lightweight structure. In the Empire State Building, elevators occupy almost 3/10 of the building's floor area. If engineers follow a similar design, the Twin Towers would lose vital floor space. The taller a building is, the more elevators it needs to service it. But the shafts take up valuable floor space. The subway system in New York provides inspiration, where local trains stop at every station and express ones fast-track to key hubs. So engineers add 2 sky lobbies to the Twin Towers. These are special floors where people can switch from a large-capacity express elevator to a local one. So multiple elevators can share the same shaft, increasing the usable floor space.
Okay, I want to point something out here, because this is something the truthers talk about a lot. They say, they talk about explosions in the basement when in fact it was like burning jet fuel falling down the elevator shafts. And they'll say, no, that can't be, because the elevators didn't service all of the floors. The shafts did. Okay, you can see here that these different local elevators in the middle, the blue ones, they service the local floors from the different skyways, but the shaft itself actually continues up the entire height of the building. And here are the express elevators as well. Okay, they go the full height of the building. So there you go.
When engineers design the Twin Towers, they protect against a crash from the largest aircraft at the time, a Boeing 707. But the hijacked aircraft are much larger Boeing 767s.
It's another important point. People point out that, the engineers themselves said that the Twin Towers could withstand a jet hitting them, but they were talking about a 707, whereas the 767 didn't come on the scene until about 9 years after the towers were built. And so it's much larger, and also they did survive the impact of the plane. It was the fire that brought them down, the jet-fueled fire.
Carrying 20,000 gallons of kerosene. This jet fuel pours down through the 12 miles of elevator shafts onto other floors, spreading like wildfire. Inside the towers, there are thousands of tons of office furnishings, many of them highly flammable, so the fire spreads unusually quickly.
The firefighters soon realized that there was no controlling this blaze. And from then on, it was concentrating on not saving the building, but on rescuing people inside.
At exactly 9:59 a.m., almost 2 hours after the first collision, the South Tower collapses in just 10 seconds. Half an hour later, the North Tower goes down too. More than 2,000 people are still inside the buildings.
It was impossible, I think, for anyone, engineer, tourist, New Yorker, to imagine that these towers could possibly come down.
After standing strong for nearly 2 hours, what ultimately causes the towers to collapse? The Twin Towers' all-steel structure is exceptionally strong, but its innovative design hides potential weaknesses. At the base of each tower, the steel columns are 4 inches thick to bear the weight of the building above. But near the top, these columns are only 1/4 of an inch thick. To protect the steel from fire, engineers coat it in a fireproofing spray. But this protective layer is thin and easily dislodged. Could this be the downfall of these iconic buildings? Structural engineer Adrian Brugger investigates if the fire could be the cause of the collapse.
The ensuing fire raged inside the building. The impact caused massive swaths of windows to be torn out, and this extra damage created winds that were actually fanning the flames.
Although the fireproof coating can withstand the flames, the impact of the aircraft leaves it compromised.
The aircraft entered the building between 400 and 550 miles per hour, and the impact lasted only 0.7 seconds. And of course, during that impact, we actually had all of that fireproofing stripped.
Adrian's team investigates how fire affects steel that has been stripped of its fireproofing. His team uses floor beams identical to those from the Twin Towers. They load them with 1.4 tons of weight to simulate the weight of each floor of the tower. They prepare to heat up the steel beam.
We will apply heat by simulating a fire.
The temperature of the fire climbs to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, equivalent to that inside the towers.
Now we're heating up the beam with flamethrowers, and you can see the temperature is going up on our infrared camera. We're reaching about 500 degrees Celsius, so that's 800 degrees Fahrenheit.
At 800 degrees Fahrenheit, the trusses hold strong, but then they start to show signs of weakness.
Now we see a cherry red spot on the beam. That's indicative of about a temperature of 750 Celsius, which is equivalent to 1,300 Fahrenheit. The beam is actually deflecting significantly.
The steel beam gives way after just 11 minutes at 1,300 degrees. Adrian's investigation shows that without fireproof...
What is it, 2,400 degrees that it melts? That's about 1,300 degrees there, and you can see how much it bends, right? It loses a significant amount of strength, like 50% of its strength there.
roofing, the floor beams cannot withstand the high heat and lose their strength. The immense heat pushes the building materials to their limit. These strong materials are not designed to withstand such extreme temperatures.
These trusses here would start to weaken, and they would start deflecting so much that they're starting to pull in on their sides where they're connected to the building. So it's actually deflecting these perimeter columns inwards. And what that does is it changes the geometry of the actual load carrying system.
Adrian has a simple demonstration to explain this concept.
So if you imagine this drink can, if it has an intact geometry and it's nice and cylindrical, this is of course a box tube, but it's essentially the same thing. If we have this drink can, then I can put an incredible amount of force on this can as long as the can itself is in no way dented. But now if I put weight on it and I just dent one little point on the side, it collapses.
The extreme heat weakens the steel floor plates, causing them to sag, pulling the walls in on each other. The heat also weakens the steel bolts that hold the floors in place, causing each floor to collapse down onto the one below, a process known as pancaking. This catastrophe goes down in history as America's darkest day. The wreckage burns for 100 days. Rescue operations salvage the structural remains of the Twin Towers. Senior Vice President of the 9/11 Memorial Museum, Anthony Gardner, leads the mission to preserve the Twin Towers structures. 1.8 million tons of debris fill Ground Zero in the aftermath of the attacks.
Essentially, it was 7-story smoldering pile of material that stretched up from street level and then also down 7 stories to the bedrock level of the site where I'm standing today.
The scale of destruction is overwhelming. But despite the force, some structures survive the collapse. These elements are conserved on the 9/11 Memorial site to this day. A display of respect and a place to remember those that lost their lives. One of the columns of the Twin Towers was found intact in its original position.
So this is the last column that stood despite the destruction. Rescue and recovery workers adorned it with all these inscriptions and tributes to their fallen colleagues.
Okay, and I should make sure that I credit Discovery there. This is Discovery UK, their channel, so I'm showing that. And somebody is saying, Steve is saying that YouTube got nuked. So I'm showing that I'm still connected. I'm not sure what's going on there, but it's my show, so it's a good thing we have lots of backups. Guys, Rumble is where it's at. I mean, earlier this week, Facebook nuked my first live stream back on Tuesday. They removed the broadcast and everything. And now it seems like we're having some problems with YouTube. Also, yeah, YouTube sent me some kind of a copyright infringement warning there because I showed about 2 minutes worth of a South Park episode. Now, I thought that would be covered under the fair use policy, and it's an episode that's available for free on the internet, for crying out loud. So not really sure what the issue is there, but I guess maybe they're just kind of paying closer attention to us these days, being dicks about it. Okay, so there you go. Now I see all of this stuff about Israel and the Jews, and yes, the reptilian shape-shifting Zionist overlords who perpetrated the inside job of 9/11 to drive us all to war by framing up a bunch of Saudis and Egyptians to get us to go to war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And it's nonsense. And I just I kind of had it, you know. There's a lot of what I think is at base anti-Semitism in all of this. And I showed on the program here before, the fact of the matter is that Ashkenazi Jews have the highest IQs. So it's not surprising that we should see them in high positions of success. And it's not surprising that we should see them in places like, Hollywood and banking and business. They had to be entrepreneurial because nobody would hire them back in the time of Shakespeare. So there are plenty of good explanations out there for why we see the kinds of social trends that we see in the world today. But people want to, cleave to their conspiracy theories with a kind of cultish fervor. And that's kind of the problem, I think, is that human beings are very prone to forming cults. They don't just like adopt beliefs; they invest in them emotionally, and then it becomes a cult. And and there are people out there, I think, that there's just no amount of evidence that I'll be able to show them to show that, like, the official story about 9/11, while perhaps not 100% complete, is the accurate story. There's no reason to jump to any conclusions about some kind of a conspiracy to drive us all to war. Never attribute malice where ineptitude will suffice as an explanation. That's Hanlon's razor. And I don't need malice where we see so much ineptitude, say, coming from George W. Bush and his administration. We know that they got the briefing that Osama bin Laden was planning to attack using planes to ram them into buildings in August, and by September they had pulled it off. And but George W. Bush was a frat boy president who spent all his time at the ranch and on the golf course, and he was super dumb. So you'd have to, in order for me to believe that 9/11 conspiracies are true, then I would have to accept that George W. Bush is a competent person. And that is pretty incredulous, I think. That would be a huge leap. So here's Chris Sky. He says, surprise, DNA tests prove that vast majority of God's chosen have no blood ties to Israel, but instead are European. LOL, another quote-unquote conspiracy theory proved fact. And this is why Israelis are the only non-brown people in the Middle East, because they aren't really from there, but they pretend to be, so they can have an excuse to murder and steal the land. And he's citing this NBC News article. Now, the reason Arabs dominate the Middle East is because they conquered it. It was the Byzantine Empire, as in the East Roman Empire. And within 100 years of the death of Muhammad, they came storming out of Arabia and had an empire that was 3 times the size of what the Romans ever had. And they conquered the Holy Land and built the Dome of the Rock on the ruins of the Jewish temple. The ruins were still there from the time the Romans had conquered them, and the Romans conquered them in the 1st and 2nd century and destroyed Jerusalem, and the Jews had been living in the diaspora ever since, all throughout Europe. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this news article that he's got here. This is NBC. Most Ashkenazi Jews are genetically Europeans, surprising study finds. Now, I just went ahead and highlighted this. It says another possibility is that the Jews actively converted both men and women among local populations at this time, although researchers would need more detailed study of paternal lineages to test that hypothesis, Richard says. So he's talking about paternal lineages. They need to test more paternal lineages. Now, what is the date on this sucker? This is from 2013. So this is a news article he's sharing from 2013. I'll go ahead and read it here. It says, the origin of the Ashkenazi Jews, who came most recently from Europe, has largely been shrouded in mystery. But a new study suggests at least their maternal lineage may derive largely from Europe. So they're talking about their maternal lineage, as in like the X chromosome or mitochondrial DNA, actually, and then there's the paternal lineage, like the Y chromosome, and here at the end they say they need to study the paternal lineages. So in 2013 they studied the maternal lineages. And by the end of the article, they say they need to study more of the paternal lineages, as in the mother's lineage, is what they're talking about in this article. And by the end of their article, they say they need to study the father's lineage. Okay. Though the finding may seem intuitive, it contradicts the notion that European Jews mostly descended from people who left Israel and the Middle East around 2,000 years ago. Instead, a substantial proportion of the population originates from local Europeans who converted to Judaism, said study co-author Martin Richards, archaeogeneticist at the University of Huddersfield in England. Tangled Legacy. Little is known about the history of Ashkenazi Jews before they were expelled from the Mediterranean and settled in what is now Poland in the 12th century. So they were expelled from the Mediterranean. On average, all Ashkenazi Jews are genetically as closely related to each other as fourth or fifth cousins, says Dr. Harry Oster, pathology, pediatrics, and genetics professor at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York, and the author of, quote, Legacy, A Genetic History of the Jewish People, close quote. But depending on whether the lineage gets traced through the maternal or paternal DNA or through the rest of the genome, researchers got very different answers on whether Ashkenazi Jews originally came from Europe or the Near East. So there you go. It's like, depending on whether the lineage gets traced through maternal or paternal DNA, you're going to get different results. Past research found that 50% to 80% of DNA from the Ashkenazi Y chromosome, which is used to trace the male lineage, originated in the Near East, Richard says. That's supported a story wherein Jews came from Israel, that supported a story wherein Jews came from Israel and largely eschewed intermarriage when they settled in Europe. So 50 to 80% of their paternal DNA traces them back to Israel, essentially. That's what they're saying. But historical documents tell a slightly different tale based on the accounts as those of Jewish historians Flavius Josephus. By the time of the destruction of the Second Temple in AD 70, as many as 6 million Jews were living in the Roman Empire, but outside Israel, mainly in Italy and southern Europe. In contrast, only about 500,000 lived in Judea, said Oster, who was not involved in the new study. Yeah, because the Romans kept attacking them. Well, it was really more like Israel, the Jews, right around that time, they were quite barbarous, Mosaic law, so on and so forth. And they were always trying to throw off the Roman mandate. And the Romans eventually had enough of them and destroyed their temple. And they've been living in the diaspora ever since. So a lot of them probably would have emigrated out of the Jewish state to avoid a lot of that conflict. So that I think that probably explains why we see 6 million Jews living throughout the Roman Empire around that time. Quote, the major Jewish communities were outside Judea, close quote, Oster told the Live Science. Maternal DNA. Richards and his colleagues analyzed mitochondrial DNA, which is contained in the cytoplasm of the egg and passed down only from the mother from more than 3,500 people throughout the Near East and Caucasus and Europe. There's the Caucasus in Europe, including Ashkenazi Jews. The team found that 4 founders were responsible for 40% of the Ashkenazi mitochondrial DNA, and all of these founders originated in Europe. The majority of the remaining people could be traced to other European lineages. Again, we're talking about mitochondrial DNA. All of these 4 founders originated in Europe, so that they trace the mitochondrial DNA back to about 4 women that were European. All told, more than 80% of the maternal lineages of Ashkenazi Jews could be traced to Europe, with only a few lineages originating in the Near East. Virtually none came from Northern Caucasus, located along the border between Europe and Asia, between the Black and Caspian Seas. Caucasus, the North Caucasus Mountains, is kind of like where Caucasians come from, by the way, which would include Indians. Indians are Caucasians. Just look at their bone structure and their faces. They have dark skin because they migrated south, and eventually that's an adaptation, the darker skin, due to the there being more intense sun in the Indian Peninsula than there are in the Northern Caucasus Mountains. But I continue. The findings should thoroughly debunk one of the most questionable but still tenacious hypotheses that most Ashkenazi Jews can trace their roots to the mysterious Khazar kingdom that flourished during the 9th century in the region between the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire, Richards and Oster said. So the Khazar kingdom, I believe they actually converted to Judaism. They were like an old kind of empire that was pretty prosperous, that converted to Judaism, and the Silk Road out of China would have gone straight through there. So they were pretty prosperous. Okay, but I continue. The genetic study suggests many of the founding Ashkenazi women were actually converts from the local European population. So that's what the study suggests. It suggests that the founding women of Ashkenazi Judaism in Europe were actually local European women and not from the Middle East. Quote, the simplest explanation is that there was mainly women who converted and they married men who'd come from the Near East, Richards told Live Science. So Yeah, that is the simplest explanation, is that Jewish men married European women when they were living in the diaspora, and they converted them to Judaism. Another possibility is the Jews actively converted both men and women among local populations at this time, although researchers would need more detailed study of paternal lineages to test that hypothesis. So that was what I read starting off here. They would need more researchers would need to study, need more detailed study of paternal lineages test that hypothesis, he says. Okay, so that's an article from 2013. Now this was published in 2000. National Library of Medicine, PubMed Central. Jewish and Middle Eastern non-Jewish populations share a common pool of Y chromosome biallelic haplotypes, which is a gene, I guess. I'm not a geneticist or anything like that, but I'm doing my best here. I'm just going to read the abstract. I don't think I have anything highlighted for this one in particular. Let me just make sure. Nope, no highlights there. So yeah, I'm just going to read the abstract. Haplotypes constructed from Y chromosome markers were used to trace the paternal origins of the Jewish diaspora. Set of 18 biallelic, biallelic. So those, an allele is like a pattern, right? It's like a gene that is similar across different people, but biallelic polymorphisms, they're talking about genes, was genotyped in 1,371 males from 29 populations, including 7 Jewish, Ashkenazi, Roman, North African, Kurdish, and Near Eastern, Yemenite, and Ethiopian, and 16 non-Jewish groups from similar geographic locations. The Jewish populations were characterized by a diverse set of 13 haplotypes that were also present in non-Jewish populations in Africa, Asia, and Europe. A series of analyses was performed to address whether modern Jewish Y chromosome diversity derives mainly from a common Middle Eastern source population or from an admixture with neighboring non-Jewish populations during and after the diaspora. Despite their long-term resistance in different countries and isolation from one another, most Jewish populations were not significantly different from one another at the genetic level. Admixture estimates suggest low levels of European Y chromosome gene flow into Ashkenazi and Roman Jewish communities. Okay, so they're saying that there wasn't a lot of men who contributed, a lot of European men who contributed to the Jewish gene pool. It was mostly coming from ethnically Jewish men. And like I was gonna say this later, but I just can't help it. It's like I find all this to be terribly distasteful. By the way, it's like we're dividing up nations on the basis of genetics and religion. So is that really? It's just sad to think that that's the stage of human development that we're at currently. I would hope that we were beyond this for the most part, but I guess not. Okay, so so where was I? Despite their long-term, European Y chromosome gene flow into Ashkenazi and Roman Jewish communities. Multidimensionally scaling plots placed 6 of the 7 Jewish populations in a relatively tight cluster that was interspersed with Middle Eastern non-Jewish populations, including Palestinians and Syrians. Pairwise differentiation tests further indicate that these Jewish and Middle Eastern non-Jewish populations were not statistically different. So these people that are living in the Palestinians and the Syrians, genetically speaking, are not statistically different from Ashkenazi Jewish populations. The results support the hypothesis that paternal gene pools of Jewish communities from Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East descended from a common Middle Eastern ancestral population, and suggests that most Jewish communities have remained relatively isolated from neighboring non-Jewish communities during and after the diaspora. So there you go. The results support the hypothesis that paternal gene pools of Jewish communities from Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East descended from a common Middle Eastern ancestral population. There it is right there. So yeah, I mean, this is a kind of quote mining, I think, that a lot of conspiracy theorists are guilty of. Let's go back to the original tweet here. Surprise, DNA tests prove the vast majority of God's chosen have no blood ties to Israel, but instead are European. Now, never mind the fact that Solomon's temple, the ruins of Solomon's temple are still there. So there was a Jewish kingdom in Jerusalem at one time. And we also have these results that say most Jewish communities descended from Middle Eastern populations. And here's another one. I think I have something highlighted in this one. Maybe not. Okay, let's read the abstract. The Y chromosome pool of Jews as part of the genetic landscape of the Middle East. A sample of 526 Y chromosomes representing 6 Middle Eastern populations, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Kurdish Jews from Israel, Muslim Kurds, Muslim Arabs from Israel and the Palestinian Authority area, and Bedouin from the Negev, was analyzed for 13 binary polymorphisms and 6 microsatellite loci. The investigation of the genetic relationships among 3 Jewish communities revealed that Kurdish and Sephardic Jews were indistinguishable from one another, whereas both differed slightly yet significantly from Ashkenazi Jews. The differences among Ashkenazim may be a result of low-level gene flow from European populations or genetic drift during isolation. So this low-level gene flow from European populations, probably the maternal contribution from European populations, as in Jewish men marrying, converting and marrying European women while they were living in the diaspora. It doesn't mean that they don't trace their roots back to the Middle East. It means that there was some intermarriage that took place between like low levels of intermarriage between the Jewish population living in the diaspora and the ethnically local European populations. So admixture between Kurdish Jews and their former Muslim host population in Kurdistan appeared to be negligible. So they're basically the same people. Kurdish Jews and Muslims living in Kurdistan are basically the same people. In comparison with data available from other relevant populations in the region, Jews were found to be more closely related to groups in north of the Fertile Crescent. Kurds, Turks, and Armenians. So they're more closely related to Kurds, Turks, Armenians in the Fertile Crescent, as in, the Garden of Eden, that whole story, that's where they trace their roots to. So they're more closely related to those people in the Fertile Crescent than to their Arab neighbors. Well, that makes sense because the Arabs came from Arabia and they conquered the Middle East. The 2 haplogroups EU9 and EU10 constitute a major part of the Y chromosome pool in the analyzed sample. Our data suggests that the EU9 originated in the northern part and the EU10 in the southern part of the Fertile Crescent. Okay, so which ones are EU9 and which ones are EU10? I think EU10 are... Okay, so the Jews are mostly from the northern Fertile Crescent, and EU9 would be that lineage. Genetic dating yielded estimates of the expansion of both haplogroups that cover the Neolithic period of the region. Palestinian Arabs and Bedouin differed from the other Middle Eastern populations studied here, mainly in specific high-frequency EU10 haplotypes not found in the non-Arab groups. Duh, they're Arabs. They came from Arabia. Whereas the indigenous population, like way back, would have been more like Kurds, Turks, Armenians, and Jews. Am I reading that right? Yes. Yeah, the Jews were found to be more closely related to groups in the North Fertile Crescent. Okay. These chromosomes might have been introduced through migrations from the Arabian Peninsula during the last 2 millennia, which is what I'm saying. The present study contributes to the elucidation of the complex demographic history that shaped the present-day genetic landscape in the region. And again, I find this all distasteful that we're having to have this conversation, but people are saying stupid shit that I need to debunk because, there's a lot of cleaning up of the ranks that I think needs to take place in the freedom movement, and I think that the root of it all is probably in these ridiculous 9/11 conspiracy theories. So I'm doing my best here, guys. What else was I going to say about that? Yeah, again, I'm just going to reiterate. It's pretty distasteful that we're trying to make these arguments here. And here's something, like, don't you guys realize, like, this is their propaganda. This is bad guy propaganda that you're parroting here. And here is Breitbart. I think I'm skipping ahead here. Okay. Here's Ryan Dawson, another conspiracy theorist that everybody likes to kind of throw at me here and there. I'm going to go back to that Breitbart article, but I think I just a little bit out of sequence. So Ryan Dawson is sharing this guy, and he's talking about the Hamas charter or some such nonsense. So
Hamas doesn't defend themselves. Look at their charter. They want to eliminate the Jewish population.
Okay. Brenda, late to the party. Morning, everyone. Okay, Brenda, you owe me 10 push-ups. Drop. Give me 10. Okay, so here is this guy. All right.
Hamas doesn't defend themselves. Look at their charter. They want to eliminate the Jewish population in the region. Wow, that's big if true. I mean, damn, that's crazy. You know what the great part about the internet is? We can go and look up this information for free. Google itself is free. Let's do a quick Google search and actually find the Hamas charter and read it. And
note the condescending tone. That is, I think, emblematic of progressivism, and progressivism is a movement to destroy the West. And as Judith Butler, the brain mother of gender is a social construct, pointed out, Hamas is part of the global progressive movement. I showed that clip here earlier this week.
Find out, where does Hamas say that they want to kill all the Jews? Well, would you look at that? A quick Google search brings us to jewishvirtuallibrary.org, where they have the entire text of the Hamas charter. Let's scroll and find the murdering Jews part. Hamas, general principles and policies. Look at this. We can just scroll all the way down and read. We can find the murdering Jews part. I'm sure it's here. I'm sure it's somewhere in there. Article 16 of the Hamas Charter. Hamas affirms that its conflict is with the Zionist project, not with the Jews because of their religion. Hamas does not wage a struggle against the Jews because they are Jewish, but wages a struggle against the Zionists who occupy Palestine. Yet it is the Zionists, aka Deborah here, who constantly identify Judaism and the Jews with their own colonial project and illegal entity. Gee, I don't know, Benny. Sounds pretty fucking base to me so far. Article 14 of the Hamas.
Note the language, the colonial project. Okay, that's Russian propaganda. They started that like in the post-World War II era, and they still use it today, especially around Africa. You know, they exacerbate a lot of these post-colonial grievances, and it's all to kind of turn everybody against the West. And another thing I want to point out here, I'll go back to the genetic argument. Do you not realize that argument applies to us? That applies to you, Chris Guy. Okay, like, you're not indigenous to Canada, so that argument applies to you as well. You see where this is going?
The Hamas Charter states the Zionist project is a racist, aggressive, colonial, and expansionist project based on seizing the properties of others. It is hostile to the Palestinian people and to their aspiration for freedom, liberation, return, and self-determination. The Israeli
What do they mean by freedom and self-determination?
entity is the place.
They live in Gaza, like it's their mandate. The Israelis do not control Gaza. They have it fenced off. They have a border with them, so they fence their border, just like Egypt does, because none of the Arab countries want to take in the Gazans, I guess, because every time they do, it leads to all kinds of problems. I mean, they've been expelled from Jordan. They went to Lebanon, and a civil war ensued. So, yeah, it's a particularly problematic population, and it's not because of their ethnicity, it's because of their ideology.
Plaything of the Zionist project and its base of aggression. Wait, where's the murdering Jews part? It's almost like it doesn't fucking exist. Could this commenter just be full of bullshit? Could it be that comments like these are simply Zionist propaganda intended to derail the conversation, to muddy the water and distract from the real issue here?
Note the progressive projection.
I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Yeah. Okay, so here is the document that he's talking about, Hamas General Principles and Policies. Now look at the heading, General Principles and Policies. So that's what he's citing. That's not the Hamas Charter. That's here. You have to click on Charter to get that. And he did one. He did one article there. I think it was. I can't remember which article it was. Here it is, 16. Hamas affirms that its conflict is with the Zionist project, not the Jews, because of their religion. Hamas does not wage a struggle against the Jews because they are Jewish, but wages a struggle against Zionists who occupy Palestine. Yet it is the Zionists who constantly identify Judaism and the Jews with their own colonial project and illegal entity. Yeah, the colonial project is the one that gives it away, okay? All this stuff about colonialism and how bad it was. All the best places to live are former European colonies. And it's Russian propaganda originally that I think the Chinese have picked up as well. You know, I did a couple of lives on this already, so I'm just going to do a little click here on the actual charter, not the principles. And you can see here's the title, Hamas, Covenant of the Islamic Resistance Movement, August 18th, 1988. So this is the actual charter. Let's see. Israel will continue and Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterates others before it. Now, does that not sound hostile to you? Yeah, I mean, and as I pointed out, when they say from the river to the sea, they mean from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Palestine will be free, and everything in between those two landmarks is Israel, which is a free country and home to about 2 million Arabs who have full citizenship. There was a case a while back where the Supreme Court justice, who was an Arab, jailed the president and prime minister who were Jewish. It's a modern liberal democracy where 2 million Arabs live in peace and harmony alongside Jews. The Israeli government provides water to Jordan and to Gaza, desalinated water from the Mediterranean Sea. So they're providing drinking water as the Jordan River is drying up. Let me just let's read a couple other gems here while I'm on this. Ye are the best nation. Okay. In the name of the most merciful Allah, ye are the best nation and hath been raised unto mankind. Yet ye command what is just, and ye forbid what is unjust, and ye believe in Allah. And if they who have received the scriptures had believed, it had surely been the better for them. There are believers among them, but the greater part of them are transgressors. So they're talking about anybody who doesn't believe in Islam here. We're transgressors. They shall not hurt you unless with a slight hurt. And if they fight against you, they shall turn their backs on you, and they shall not be helped. They are smitten with vileness wheresoever they are found, unless they obtain security by entering into a treaty with Allah and a treaty with men. So yeah, anybody who doesn't adhere to the doctrines of Islam is vile. That's what they're saying there. Okay. And they draw on themselves indignation from Allah, and they are afflicted with poverty. No, they're not. They're rich. The Israelis are probably the richest country in the Middle East. And well, no, I mean, that's not fair. I would say, like, in terms of overall quality of life, but, you know, there are some pretty oil-rich nations out there like Saudi Arabia. This they suffer because they disbelieved the signs of Allah and slew the prophets unjustly. This because they were rebellious and transgressed. Okay, let me see now. I think the article to which he was referring was here's Article 6, characteristics and independence. Let's take a look at the quote here. How excellent was the Muslim prophet Muhammad Iqbal when he wrote, If faith is lost, there is no security and there is no life for him who does not adhere to a religion. So you don't have a right to life or security if you don't adhere to Islam. He who accepts life without religion has taken annihilation as his companion for life. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's not a religious war. No, not at all. It's about land, right? Yeah, right. I think I wanted to read another one here. Okay. I think it was this one. It is necessary to follow Islamic orientation in educating the Islamic generations in our region by teaching the religious duties, comprehensive study of the Quran, and study of the Prophet's Sunnah, and learning about Islamic history and heritage from their authentic sources. This should be done by specializing in learning people using a curriculum that would healthily form the thoughts and faith of the Muslim student. Side by side, this with a comprehensive study of the enemy, his human and financial capabilities, learning about his points of weakness and strengths, and getting to know the forces supporting and helping him should also be included. Also, it is important to be acquainted with the current events, to follow what is new, and the study, the analysis and commentaries made of these events. Planning for the present and future, studying every trend appearing is a must so that the fighting Muslim would live knowing his aim, objective, and his way in the midst of what is going on around him. The fighting Muslim. That doesn't sound violent, does it? Here's the quote. Looks like Lockman verses 16 to 18. Oh, my son, verily every matter, whether good or bad, though it be the weight of a grain of a mustard seed, and be hidden in a rock or in the heavens or in the earth, Allah will bring the same to light, for Allah has clear-sighted and knowing. O my son, be constant at prayer and command what is that which is just, and forbid that which is evil. As in, command compliance with Islamic doctrine and forbid anything else. And be patient under the afflictions which shall befall thee, for this is a duty absolutely incumbent on all men. Distort not thy face out of contempt to men, neither walk in the earth with insolence, for Allah loveth no arrogant, vainglorious person. And what is the one that I wanted to look for here? There was one other. Oh, that's not right. Oh, here we go. Yeah, it was Article 6. I think, did I skip over that? I'm not even sure now. Okay, so Article 6, characteristics and independence. The Islamic resistance movement is a distinguished Palestinian movement whose allegiance is to Allah and whose way of life is Islam. It strives to raise the banner of Allah over every inch of Palestine, for under the wing of Islam, followers of all religions can coexist in security and safety, where their lives, possessions, and rights are concerned. In the absence of Islam, strife will be rife, oppression spreads, evil prevails, and schisms and wars will break out. So, yeah, so the whole region, because it was once conquered by Islamists in the wake of the death of Muhammad. And that is something that Winston Churchill talked about when they were issuing the Balfour Declaration, is he was very concerned about the Muslim inalienability of land. Once it is conquered, it can no longer go back to being non-Muslim. And they're saying they want to bring that land under the banner of Allah, and it is for under the wing of Islam that followers of all religions can coexist in security and safety. So yeah, they all need to be subservient to Islam, any other religion. So there were Christians and Jews living in the Holy Land when it was under Muslim rule, and their lives were not good. They're called dhimmis in the text of Islam, and they live in dimnitude, which means they have to pay the jizya, which is a tax for non-Muslims living under Muslim rule. They have to pay an extra tax, and there were all kinds of ridiculous rules that had to apply to them when they were living in living in the Holy Land, or living anywhere where Islam reigned supreme. And they, like the Jews, were not allowed to build houses that were higher than the height of a Muslim man. So they would actually dig down underground and build their roofs to be just to be able to stand up in their own houses. They had to dig down underground to put the floor below grade. And let's see here. How excellent was the Muslim, and Christians weren't allowed to ride horses. They had to ride donkeys, and they had to ride them backwards and wear a sign around their neck and all of this stuff. That's why the first crusades were initiated in 1095, and they called it like the crusades to liberate the Holy Land, because Jews and Christians were oppressed by Muslims living in the Holy Land after it was conquered by Muslims. Quote, if faith is lost, there is no security and there's no life for him who does not adhere to religion. He who accepts life without religion has taken annihilation as his companion for life. So that's me. I'm an atheist. So they're going to annihilate me, I guess. Okay. Dimny. So this is one thing that I want to talk about now. And before I get into dimnitude, I already talked about this before. I talked about the principle of taqiyya in Islam, as in concealing one's true convictions for the purpose of furthering the cause of jihad, which is the movement to bring the world under the banner of Islam. And and that's a well-established, widely recognized principle in Islam. Taqiyya, it's the concealment of the true beliefs, and kitman is another principle that I showed here too. Deliberate deception, again, for the purpose of furthering the cause of jihad. So if this redheaded stepchild over here does not understand or has not heard of things like taqiyya, kitman, dimnitude, the hijra, as in conquest through migration, through emigration in particular. If you're not familiar with these terms, then you should probably shut up. Okay, so here is the Dhimmi on Wikipedia. A Dhimmi, collectively, the people of the covenant, or Muhad, is a historical term for non-Muslims living in an Islamic state with legal protection. The word literally means, quote unquote, protected person, referring to the state's obligation under the Sharia to provide the individual's life, property, as well as freedom of religion in exchange for loyalty to the state and payment of the jizya tax, in contrast to the zakat, or obligatory alms paid by the Muslim subjects. Dhimmi were exempt from certain duties assigned specifically to Muslims if they paid the poll tax, jizya, but were otherwise equal under the law's property, contract, and obligation. Yes, and they're also subject to all kinds of vitriol and oppression. There aren't any Jews in Egypt right now. I mean, where they all go, right? There were once upon a time, but there aren't anymore. Historically, Dhimmi's status, which originally applied to Jews, Christians, and Sabians, who were considered people of the book in Islamic theology. Later, the status was also applied to the Zoroastrians, Sikhs, Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists. There is the verse that I've cited here before. It's called Surah 9, verse 5. It's commonly known as the verse of the sword, that commands Muslims to wage war against, it says, fight and kill the idolaters or infidels, depending on translation, wherever you meet them. And so that's everybody else, right? That's all of these people. And we're expected to, all the non-Muslims are expected to live in dignitude and pay that extra tax. And there are all kinds of additional regulations to come along with that as well. I would recommend Robert Spencer's book, The Truth About Muhammad, if you want to know more about that. Jews and Christians were required to pay the jizya, while others, depending on different rulings of the four madhabs, might be required to accept Islam, pay the jizya, be exiled, or killed. During the rule of al-Mutawakkili, whatever that is, the 10th Abbasid Caliph, numerous restrictions reinforced the second-class status of dhimmis and forced their communities into ghettos. For instance, they were required to distinguish themselves from their Muslim neighbors by their dress. They were not permitted to build new churches or synagogues or repair old churches according to the Pact of Umar. So that's oppression. They say, like, they say in some of these charters that they're going to support plurality and everybody can live, can peacefully coexist under the wing of Islam. But in fact, history paints a very different picture, where they're living under the oppression of Islam. So here continuing here, I'm just going to read a couple more paragraphs. Under Sharia, the Dhimmi communities were usually governed by their own laws in place of some of the laws applicable to the Muslim community. For example, the Jewish community of Medina was allowed to have its own halakhic courts, and the Ottoman Millet system allowed its various dhimmi communities to rule themselves under the separate legal courts. These courts did not cover cases that involved religious groups outside of their own communities or capital offenses. Dhimmi communities were also allowed to engage in certain practices that were usually forbidden for the Muslim community, such as the consumption of alcohol and pork. Some Muslims reject the dhimma system by arguing that it is a system which is inappropriate in the age of nation states and democracies. Well, yes, let's support those people. There are reformers out there. I always got to point that out. Majid Nawaz is probably one of my favorites. He is the founder of Quilliam, and he is Muslim, and he was radical. He was extremist. He did some prison time in Egypt, and now he works to reform the faith. And he's also British. So, yeah, that's what's really needed, is something like a reformation that we saw with Luther in Christianity. But there's no Luther in Islam as of yet. So I think that Majid Nawaz is probably the best candidate for an Islamic Luther right now. There is a range of opinions among the 20th century and contemporary Islamic theologians about whether the notion of dhimma is appropriate for modern times, and if so, what form it should take in an Islamic state. There are differences among the Islamic mahabs regarding which non-Muslims can pay jizya and have dhimmi status. The Hanafi and Malika mahabs generally allow non-Muslims to have dhimmi status. In contrast, the Shafi'iyya and Hanbali madhabs only allow Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians to have dhimmi status, and they maintain that all other non-Muslims must either convert to Islam or be fought. Well, killed, I think they would say. Zoroastrians, that's an interesting example too, because once upon a time, Zoroastrian was the official religion of the Persian Empire, or modern day Iran, and it is now Islamic. And how many Zoroastrians are there in the world today? It's about 100,000. Okay, so that was once the official religion of the Persian Empire, and now there's only about 100,000 of them left, ever since Iran was conquered by the Muslims. Okay. So here's True North. Yeah, here's True North. Here's what we see happening on Canadian soil. And I've pointed out before, like the boycott of a Jewish-owned coffee shop in Toronto really doesn't have anything to do with Zionism. It has everything to do with anti-Semitism. So here is what's going on in Canada right now over all of this. Student brawl breaks out at Concordia University over Israel-Hamas war. And we see this lovely young girl giving the finger to somebody. And I watched the video, and she called. There were some students that were gathered, Jewish students, to hold up the signs of the missing people that were captured by Hamas during the October 7 massacre, and they're still being held hostage. And here she is flipping some of these people off, calling them kikes. That was in the video. I think they have it here. Yeah. Bear with me. That's what she says. Well, she's giving her the finger. It's effing kike. Okay, so here's the article from True North. 3 people were injured and 1 arrested after Concordia University brawl between students protesting the Israel-Hamas war. Montreal police were called to the scene around 1:30 p.m. after 3 people were reported injured. A 22-year-old woman was later arrested, according to Global News. Numerous videos posted on social media show the altercation breakout between pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian students. This incident was the result of 2 separate student groups who held independent fundraising events to raise awareness about the conflict in close proximity to one another. Student behavior at the event began to escalate quickly, and it took several hours for officials to break it up. Montreal police confirmed that a 54-year-old, a student in their 20s, and a 19-year-old security guard were all injured in the skirmish. Several politicians came out publicly to publicly condemn the actions of certain students, including Montreal Mayor Valérie Plante, after videos of it began to circulate on social media. Pascal Derry, the province's higher education minister, also took to social media to express his dismay with the occurrence, calling for calm. Quote, it is sickening to see the violent targeting of Jewish students take place at Concordia University today. In no way is this behavior acceptable in any context. It must cease immediately, close quote, wrote Mark Miller, Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship on X, formerly Twitter. So, yeah, violent targeting of Jewish students at Concordia, which is where Gad Saad is as a professor. So that's pretty disappointing to see. Okay, and here is Bob Mackin on Twitter, and he's tweeting out pro-Hamas protester Harsha Walia and her comrades. That's a good word to use. Her comrades cornered frightened staff of Israeli shipping company Zim at the company's Vancouver office earlier today.
Zim is active in the genocide committed by the Israeli state.
3 people coming over. The staff member here is exaggerating on the phone call with the police.
The police have been called.
They're claiming that we're vandalizing their offices when we've just put up names of children who have been killed by the weapons that this company ships. And they've been filming us, and they're on the phone with the police right now. They have refused to take the information.
Zim has called the cops on an occupation to end the genocide.
It's not a genocide, it's a counterterrorism operation.
This company is complicit in the genocide of Palestinian people. Zim is complicit, is an active supporter of the state of Israel, which is currently committing war crimes. We have shut down the offices of Zim, an Israeli shipping company that sends arms to Israel. We are in solidarity with every single block the boat action that has been happening across these lands. Actions in Tacoma, actions in Oakland.
Okay, so there you go. I mean, what can you say? They're talking about Israel committing war crimes. This is very typical of the left, where enemies of civilization attack the West, like, say, for example, in the October 7 massacre, when they raped women and killed children. And when the West responds, I'm counting Israel as essentially a Western liberal democracy. And when civilization responds, they zero in on that and say, oh my God, look at how terrible these people are. Like, what are they supposed to do? Lay down and die? Well, yeah, I think that's what they expect them to do. And Robin is saying, I say we need intervention here at home. Come to Canada, become Canadian, or go fight for, quote, your country, close quote, over there. Yeah, no kidding. That is the thing. Like, none of these idiotic college students are ever going to take up arms overseas for their cause, are they? And here is the National Compost. And the title is First Reading: The Man Who Led a Street Full of Cheering Montrealers in a Prayer to, quote, kill them all. Adil Charkawi has been linked to via allegations and investigations to extremist groups ranging from Al-Qaeda to ISIS. And here's the quote: Allah, take care of these Zionist aggressors. Allah, take care of the enemies of the people of Gaza. Allah, identify them all, then exterminate them. And don't spare any of them. Close quote. Adil Charkawi told a crowd in Arabic at a pro-Palestinian protest on October 28th. Let's see. Here's where it starts. The speaker was Montreal Imam Adil Charkawi, and the venue was the city's October 28th, quote, Stop the Genocide in Gaza, close quote, rally, one of the dozens of Canadian events organized over the last 30 days by Palestinian Youth Movement, a group that has openly praised October 7 massacres and called for continued violence against Israel. Charkawi's speech may very well have been overlooked entirely if he hadn't posted it online himself. He posted it from multiple angles to his Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook profiles, along with lengthy screeds calling for the violent destruction of Israel and denouncing Western media and politicians as Zionist collaborators. Quote, Israel terrorist politicians complicit, close quote. He wrote in French in an October 31st post, repeating a chant led by the same crowd who cheered his, quote, kill them all, close quote, prayer. Quote, the only solution is the end to the occupation, close quote, he added, alleging that the, quote, Zionist entity, close quote, could be destroyed in 24 hours if not for, quote unquote, traitors in the Arab world staying the Palestinians' hand. Traders in the Arab world, like the Saudis, who are telling. I mean, I showed a video here yesterday where there was a Saudi author saying, you know, the Palestinians, like it's not an ethnicity. There's a mixture of Druze, of Bedouin, of Arab, of like all kinds of different people living there. He was saying, I would host a Jew in my house. I would not host a Palestinian in my house. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with ethnicity. It has everything to do with ideology, and their ideology drives them to violence. Back to the article. This is not out of the ordinary for Cherkaoui, a Moroccan immigrant who has spent more than 20 years facing allegations and police investigations linking him to Islamist groups ranging from Al-Qaeda to the Taliban and ISIS, none of which has stopped him from obtaining Canadian citizenship and even being cited as an expert on, quote, anti-Islamophobia, close quote. Yeah, you see what the progressives are doing? Again, it's a movement to destroy the West. And Hamas is a part of the global progressive movement, according to Judith Butler, who is a seminal author of the progressive movement, the modern progressive movement. Cherkaoui's October 28th speech galvanized a Quebec media and political class that had largely been waiting for Montreal's growing spate of anti-Israel rallies to fizzle out on their own. On Tuesday, Quebec Premier François Legault said the speech incited, quote, hate and violence, close quote, and called on law enforcement to take notice. Quote, it is not my place to tell police how to do their job, but inciting violence is not allowed, close quote, he said. The leaders of Quebec's other three main political parties soon followed suit. Cherkaoui, in turn, has alleged he is the victim of a campaign of Zionist defamation. They play victim. They cry out as they strike you, these progressives. Quote, the Zionist entity has lost the battle of public opinion. It is therefore normal that the Zionist narrative would change, close quote. He wrote in French on November 7th, announcing his October 28th speech. Quote, it contains no hate or calls for violence. On the contrary, it was clear condemnation of violence, war crimes, and crimes against humanity executed by the Zionist army of occupation, close quote, he said in French. Cherkaoui does not say his, quote, kill them all, close quote, prayer was mistranslated or misinterpreted, only that it was directed at, quote, Zionist aggressors committing what I consider to be a genocide, close quote. Quote, the word Jew was never used in my speech, nor in my prayer, close quote, he said, asserting that it thus doesn't fit the criminal code definition for inciting hatred because he didn't target an, quote, identifiable group, close quote. He also added that it was a call for violence because he was called on it was not a call for violence because he was calling on God to do the killing. Quote, it was a prayer for judgment, close quote, he said. Plausible deniability, I think, is the first refuge of the scoundrel and progressive, but I repeat myself. In 2003, it emerged that the Canadian intelligence agencies had identified Cherkaoui as a potential Al-Qaeda sleeper agent before withdrawing a security certificate against him in 2009 on the basis that it would reveal their intelligence sources. In the years before the 9/11 attacks, RCMP and CSIS investigators said they observed Cherkaoui carrying out credit card fraud purportedly to fund overseas terrorism. In an intercepted 2000 phone call, investigators said he could be heard discussing, quote, seizing control of a plane for aggressive reasons, close quote. In 2015, it emerged that at least two former members of Cherkaoui's Centre Communautaire Islamique et l'Est de Montréal, Montreal East Islamic Community Center, had been arrested as they allegedly attempted to travel to Syria in a bid to join ISIS. At the time, Parti Québécois secularism critic Engue Malte accused Cherkaoui of quote-unquote recruiting jihadis. Cherkaoui did not deny a connection to the two men arrested, but chalked up all other accusations to the political quote-unquote witch hunt. Cry out as they strike you. It was around this same time that Cherkaoui founded the Quebec Collective Against Islamophobia, on whose behalf he would testify at a 2015 Quebec National Assembly hearing. In 2014, Reuters would cite him as an expert about the reported rise in anti-Muslim bullying. following an Islamist terror attack on Parliament Hill. That was the shooting death of Corporal Nathan Cirillo at the hands of Islamic terrorists. His name escapes me at the minute, but yeah, I know who he is. Anyway, you'll notice the change here. This is something that I kind of want to note. Like, we're in a fourth turning, as I'm always pointing out, and a fourth turning is a crisis era that we enter into every 4 generations. When the generation born in the wake of the previous fourth turning, that being the Second World War and the boomer generation, reaches peak institutional power in their early elderhood just prior to retirement. Back in 2000, we were all over this guy. But since we've entered the fourth turning, starting in 2008 with the global financial collapse, now he's become an expert on anti-Islamophobia. So this is the kind of gaslighting that they engage in. And yeah, that's kind of what I see happens, is that particular generational archetype, which is the generational archetype of the prophet, so named for the generations who found our religions, they have daddy issues for the greatest generation of war veterans who liberated us from the previous fourth turning, that being the GI generation in World War II. And so they go completely in the opposite direction. They abandon philosophy. Stoicism and cynicism are pejoratives of the modern vernacular, when in fact they are founding philosophies of the West, for example. And they get in bed with all of our adversaries and betray us. They betray all veterans, including those coming up behind them that they seem to forget exist. Okay, so back to the article. It was around the same time that Jacques founded the Quebec Collective Against Islamophobia, on whose behalf he would even testify at a 2015 Quebec National Assembly hearing. In 2014, Reuters would cite him as an expert about the purported rise in anti-Muslim bullying following an Islamic attack on Parliament Hill. Sorry about that. I repeated that. Just 2 years ago, as Canada scrambled to evacuate former allies from Afghanistan following the country's recapture by the Taliban, Charkawi was issuing social media posts praising the Taliban as religious warriors who had chased out foreign, quote-unquote, invaders. Men, women, and children can finally know liberation, close quote. Yeah, man, I posted something about girls in Afghanistan being sold into sex slavery right now. That's the kind of thing that's going on there now under the Taliban. So he has a very different idea of what constitutes liberation than what we do in the West. And that is something to be mindful of whenever you're reading this kind of thing. When they talk about liberation, what they mean is Islam taking over, and everybody else has to live under what they call wing of Islam, and what the rest of us would consider boot of Islam. So, and we got to empower moderates. That is the solution here. We need to have some difficult conversations with people about their ideas. And it's like I say, like, humans have this nasty tendency to invest emotionally in their beliefs, and form cults. Basically, that's what happens. It happens organically. And the 9/11 truthers, or conspiracy theorists, I'll call them from here on out, it's a cult. Like, there's basically no amount of evidence that I can present them to show them that it was not an inside job, and sure as hell was not perpetrated by Zionists. It was what we say it was. It was an attack by Al Qaeda, and it's just a ridiculous narrative, So anyway, I'll be talking about that a little bit more, because there's some waking up that needs to be done, even on the freedom side of the house right now. So here's Alexandra Labois, and she is tweeting out, now in Montreal, here at one of the yeshivas that was shot overnight, police dogs are on site investigating. So the yeshiva is a Jewish school. I think this is an elementary school. So here's some footage from the side. And they have the dog sniffing around for clues here, because this is a Jewish school that was shot. Okay, good doggy. Here is Honest Report in Canada, happening now at Concordia. They say pro-Palestinian activists try to intimidate Jewish students on campus who set up an installation calling on all the hostages kidnapped by Hamas to be returned home. We commend these Jewish students for not backing down to these thugs. Here we go.
Israel, you cannot! Israel for genocide! You committed genocide!
Why does it matter? You know what?
And there's the girl calling the Jewish girl a kike.
You kidnapped my brothers and sisters, brother. You kidnapped my own clothes. My own got kidnapped by your regime. You give my family up right now. You give my family. You give my family. You give my family. What family? You give my family. You invaded my land, brother. Your family's in Europe. Everyone that you went is in Europe, brother. You came, you stole from all you murdered innocents. 10,000 innocent civilians. 10,000 innocent civilians were murdered by.
And they're wearing the Palestinian keffiyeh. That's a sign of the movement. That's a sign of Hamas, that they're Hamas supporters. So, on. Here it's Avi Yamini. Breaking, a group of Palestinian men have traveled to the heart of Melbourne's Jewish community and assaulted locals. So, not just Canada. This is going on all over the West, as I've been showing. So they started pushing the Jewish guys, and now they're, I don't know, slapping them. There he's wearing the keffiyeh again. Palestinian flag on his t-shirt.
I expect him to stop.
You respect the hostages then.
You killed the hostages.
Yeah, that's a good point. This could all end right now if Hamas just returned their hostages and surrendered.
Stop, listen to me. Stop. All right?
That's okay. Why do you come here? Why are you here? What do you want? What do you want?
Just stop. All right? Stop.
What is it happening? He's standing here. Why is he coming to me and telling me I'm a Zionist pig? Why is he calling me a Zionist pig?
There you go. And Uncle Kenny over in Rumble is saying, who funded Al-Qaeda in the 70s? That was the U.S., and they were the Mujahideen at the time, which is a broader term for Islamist or jihadi. That was to repel the what do you call it? The Russian invasion into Afghanistan. And, I think that they're the kind of half measures that we have adopted in the wake of the Vietnam War, since the boomers chickened out of standing up to that commie dragon when he was a third world country, like the silent generation did in Korea. The Vietnam War was the second Indochina War. The Korean War was the first Indochina War. They were the same war and had every same legal and moral justification. And so we've gone with these half measures ever since, where we try to empower local populations to overthrow their communist invaders. But there has been a kind of amnesia in the West with respect to some of the darker elements of Islam and some of these movements. And so, they created a monster in the process. I think they were very well intentioned. It was really more about supporting the local communities. It didn't really have anything to do with funding terrorism at the time. So, that's not to say that the U.S. Are the perfect guys, but they are the good guys. And the same goes for Israel and for the rest of the West. We are the good guys, but we're not the perfect guys. We've made some mistakes along the way. and especially since the boomer generation came of age. So here's Avi Amini again. Breaking tonight, pro-Hamas supporters traveled an hour from Melbourne's north to the Jewish community in Caulfield, only to break through a police line and violently attack local Jews. Sound familiar? Because free Palestine. Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with liberating Palestine or anything like that. Like, you know, Arabs, 2 million Arabs live in Israel, and they are free and full citizens, and they vote and all that stuff.
Oh, the pepper spray's out! Stay back! Stay back! Shame on the police! Shame on Victoria! Shame on you! Show who came in! Show him!
There you go. They're showing up at some of these Jewish rallies and attacking people. It's going on all over the world. So, this is a little bit of a sequence, which says, Montreal, November 9, bullets reportedly shot at 2 Jewish facilities, Yeshiva, Gedola, and Talmud Torah elementary schools. So these are elementary schools being shot up in Canada. No sound on this one, guys, but they're just kind of showing the outside of the elementary school. So, yep. So they're shooting at, what are they saying here? That they're going to come by and kill all the Jewish children at some point. And speaking of progressives, here's a progressive using her own child as a human shield. This is a trend that we see. They have in common with Hamas, which is part of the global progressive movement, according to Judith Butler. Laurel Collins, imagine being pregnant with no medicine, no food, no water, no electricity. Over 50,000 pregnant women are without access to medical care in Gaza. Over 4,000 children have been killed since the start of the siege. We need a ceasefire. So here's this NDP MP, and she is, she's got her baby on her chest for some reason. I'm pretty sure she could find childcare or a babysitter or something like that. So this is all theatrics, and she's basically using her child as a human shield in order to push this propagandistic progressive narrative.
Mr. Speaker, we cannot turn away from the humanitarian crisis unfolding. In Gaza, there are over 50,000 pregnant women without access to medical care. Over 100 women give birth every single day amidst the chaos. New Democrats from the beginning have called for a ceasefire, condemned Hamas's violence, and called for a release of all hostages. And now, as people who have nothing to do with Hamas's violence are being killed, we must center human rights, international law, and human decency. C-sections are being performed without anesthetic. Imagine being pregnant with no medicine, no food, no water, no electricity. Women are miscarrying. Mothers and babies are dying daily amidst bombings and attacks. 4,000 children have been killed since the start of this siege. 4,000 kids. Mr. Speaker, how many more babies have to die before this government will call for a ceasefire?
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
How about after they return the hostages, we call for a ceasefire? But that's what they started doing right away. As soon as Israel started to mount a response to try to get their hostages back, they're calling for a ceasefire. And it's not for good reasons. It's because they're anti-Semitic, because they're progressives. And every Western country, like progressivism, like I say, is a movement to destroy the West. And Uncle Kenny is asking me, is Rebel News biased? Yes, they are. As a matter of fact, here is a clip from Ezra's show just the other day. Have a listen to this.
I'll try and come back for the actual main application itself. You might think this is an obscure issue.
Are you guys getting that? I don't think it's showing up on the screen. Oh, wait, there it is. Okay.
But I don't think so. I think it's interesting that in Canada, accused murderers, even accused terrorists, are often set free.
He's talking about the Coots 4, by the way.
Into the community, but these men are behind bars. As I said the last time I was down here, there is another factor that we have to discuss, and it is that group called the Diagolon. Not sure if you've heard of that. It's sort of a made-up paramilitary, militia-style, right-wing jokey group, but the jokes
Paramilitary, huh? What's paramilitary about them?
suddenly turned real. The men who were accused here showed some sort of affiliation with Diagon online. One of them, Chris Lysak, was dubbed the chief of security for Diagolon, what I think started out as an online joke. Well, these men, I think, took a little too seriously, and they started acting it out at a time when there were dozens of police in town looking for a way to prosecute and to charge. And Diagolon provided that glue, that narrative for both the media, politicians, and police to say, these aren't just ordinary people who are frustrated with Trudeau. This is a conspiracy that have dark plans. It's not a conspiracy, it's a conspiracy to commit murder. And that was a charge they laid. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. I obviously do not know if these men are guilty or innocent. And I'll keep coming back here till we find out. I think this is an interesting case, and it's a case that Rebel News will cover. So that's my report from Lethbridge. Now back to the studio for an interview with our...
Okay, so Ezra's Fed jacketing again, or well, not much of a Fed jacket, I guess, but he did Fed jacket Jeremy McKenzie not that long ago. So absolutely, he has his biases. And I think what's happening, what I concluded in the live stream that I did on this previously, was that a lot of these folks under pressure are starting to show their true colors, and that Rebel News is really just a shill for the Conservative Party of Canada. They don't report honestly on Maxime Bernier, that's for sure. They're always saying like he's finished, he's done after his loss in Portage Lisgar, and you know the polls are showing, well, especially in the prairies, he's at like 15% in the prairies. The PPC is at about 15%, so that's enormous. That's about 4 times what the Greens are getting, and nationally, I think they're neck and neck with the Greens, and they've only been around for a couple of years, whereas you know the Greens have been around for decades. So yeah, they're showing their true biases in all of this. You know, I think we're all learning a lot about the media ecosystem. Okay, here's Dr. Eli David. If your cute daughter decides to become a suicide bomber, will you be happy? Quote, I will be happy. I will help her and encourage her, close quote. These are Palestinian civilians. So this is something else that's going on at some of these demonstrations. Here you go. I'll give you the translation. It says, let me see. That will help us win in the name of Allah. Do you think we will see more Fajr 5 rockets hitting Tel Aviv? I wish in the name of Allah. Wishing for more rockets to hit Tel Aviv. Hello. Shall we kidnap you? Oh, God. They're pretty candid. The people wearing these Hamas scarves in particular. Do you want to abduct me? Yes. Really? This is your daughter? Is she part of the Hamas? Of course, we are all Hamas. I cannot understand this. Why? You are her father. Yes. She is Hamas from birth. Really? Yes. How old is she? 1 year, 5 months. She supports Hamas? Of course. Her blood is green. I'm asking you again. If you're just listening, they're kind of clipping back and forth between different people. But if you will lose your daughter, beloved, cute daughter, if she decides she wants to be a suicide bomber, will you be happy about that? I will help her and encourage her. Really? Really? That it will help us win in the name of Allah. Okay, so that's looping around now. And just a reminder, here's Visegrad 24. Thousands of Gazans are leaving. The Palestinians are fleeing to safety and are using the Israeli safe corridor to do so. The Israeli corridor helps these Palestinian civilians keeps these Palestinians safe from the dangers of Hamas, roadblocks, and snipers. So here's some footage. So what the Israelis are doing is they're conducting anti-terrorist operations, particularly in the north, to destroy some of these Hamas strongholds. And I've shown some footage of bunker busters taking out tunnels and underground bunkers and things like that here. And they've been telling people in the north that they should flee to safety in the south and be refugees there. And we've seen some of these crowds walking, holding up white flags and the like. And if this were a genocide, of course, then the IDF would be mowing them down, but that's not what they're doing. They're providing them safe passage and saying, if you remain in the north, then we're going to, like we're still going to conduct our operations. We're going to assume that you're there to support Hamas, and Hamas will encourage them to stay so they can be murdered and then get that propaganda win where they'll show civilians who are their supporters, who have been murdered, who are dead, and show all kinds of pictures of them and say, look at what that terrible Israel is doing. But the fact of the matter is Hamas has a well-established history of using their civilians as human shields. There you go. All kinds of people being allowed to flee to the south. And here is Dr. Eli David again, and he says, Israeli officer, quote, the most horrendous crimes were committed by Gaza civilians. Hamas terrorists mostly killed soldiers and moved on. Civilians did most of the lynching, mutilating, slaughtering, beheading, and burning. So this is according to an IDF officer. Put that lens over it, take it for what it's worth. Who slaughtered, who raped, who murdered, who beheaded? It was civilians. It wasn't Hamas. It was civilians. That's what they don't understand. That it was civilians. Hamas came, opened it up, killed soldiers, and moved on. Who came and raped and looted and committed all of the atrocities, the cruelty we saw? That was the civilians. That's what the world needs to understand. You saw that? I saw it with my own eyes. I saw it with my own eyes. And here is a homosexual being thrown from the roof and stoned. This is what it looks like under the wing of Islam. Now, I can't really confirm from this video where this is taking place. Kind of looks like Gaza, though, just based on the rubble and the general state of affairs. Here is Netanyahu, and he's on Fox News doing an interview.
Joining us now to talk about the war is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Brett.
And Uncle Kenny is saying on Rumble, yes, the atrocities are on both sides. That does happen. Yeah. But I mean, the modus operandi of Hamas is to commit atrocities, whereas the Israeli side, it is the exception. And I saw a video there earlier, and I don't think I queued it up for today, but I did see a video earlier where there was an IDF soldier. It looked like, at least, it was hard to confirm, but it looked like an IDF soldier crouching behind a woman who was a Palestinian captive, taken captive, a detainee, I guess, of the IDF, and he crouched behind her with his rifle, pointing it down the street. It looked like that would be a case of using human shields. That is the exception for Israel. I think that person probably just lost their head under pressure and will likely be charged by the IDF, by Israel. But in the case of Hamas, I mean, they'll use children and everything.
First of all, give us your assessment.
Like I said, we're not the perfect guys. We're the good guys.
Of where things are. We understand that IDF forces are inside Gaza, inside and around Gaza City. Where do you see this at this hour?
I think the Israeli army is performing exceptionally well. It's fighting the terrorists, both above ground and below ground. We're doing everything in our power to reduce civilian casualties. We've managed safe zones and safe corridors so civilians can heed our call to leave, even though Hamas is trying to keep them in. And I think the war is proceeding well. We're going to continue until we eradicate Hamas. Nothing will stop that. We're absolutely committed to victory, which is not only our victory, but it's the victory of the entire civilized world against barbarism.
Do you still believe that the Hamas leadership, including Yahya Sinwar, is still in or underneath Gaza City?
Oh, it's there, but we'll get there.
To get those leaders, how long do you envision this being? Will it be an occupation of Gaza for months and months?
Well, first of all, we don't seek to govern Gaza. We don't seek to occupy it, but we seek to give it and us a better future in the entire Middle East. And that requires defeating Hamas. I've set goals. I didn't set a timetable because, it can take more time. I wish it'll take little time. But we're proceeding step by step, reducing our casualties in the process, trying to reduce and minimize civilian casualties and maximize the casualties of the Hamas terrorists. And so far, I think it's proceeding well. But again, this is a war game. You fought ISIS, you fought Al-Qaeda. It took you a long time. I don't think it'll take us that long by any stretch of the imagination. But however long it takes, we'll do it because our future, the future of our neighbors, the future of the Palestinians, the future of the world, I think, is related to who wins. Does the axis of terror of Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, do they win? Or do the forces of progress and prosperity, Israel, the United States, the modern Arab states, do we win? It's important that we win. And, history has shown that, it doesn't necessarily favor the good guys over the bad guys. If the bad guys have more will, more resolve, more staying power, then they win. And they can cast the Middle East and the world into another period of dark ages. That's where they want. Well, we don't want it. So we have the perseverance, the will, and the resolve to win, however long it takes. But I'll assure you, we'll try to make it as short as we can.
Okay. Yeah, I concur. I mean, it is a battle for civilization. That's what it's always been. It's always been the barbarians versus the civilized. And we saw plenty of barbarism on 7 October. I got kicked off of Facebook for trying to show some of it because apparently people are even denying that any of that took place. But there's plenty of video evidence out there to support that there was, in fact, a massacre. And it was quite barbaric, to say the least. So. And the corridor that I just showed, a little bit of a sequence today, guys, but the corridor that I just showed, the refugee corridor that the IDF is protecting to allow people to migrate from the north, where they're conducting their operations, into the south, where they're setting up safe zones for people who don't support Hamas necessarily. This is, oh wait, no, that's not it. I showed something yesterday though that showed them firing rockets on that corridor, but this is rockets from Gaza into Israel in the last 30 days. These are images that are compiled from radar tracking systems. So here we go. Look at that. It's raining rockets in the last 30 days. Even some of them going to the south. Look at that. Down here in the south. That's crazy. But there are the overwhelming majority of them, I think, are going toward Tel Aviv. So pretty incredible. So I mean, why would they withdraw and accept a ceasefire while that is ongoing? They shouldn't. Here's CTV News, and they're saying, news, quote unquote. They're saying, will Gaza Strip evacuees be granted immigration status in Canada? It depends, minister says. So I showed this yesterday. No, yesterday I had an appointment, but the day before that was something that's being floated in Israel right now. There's a report out there, a paper that was produced recommending that we evacuate, or they evacuate the Palestinians to Egypt and then eventually settle them in places like Canada. So here's the latest on that. Ottawa Immigration Minister Mark Miller says the immigration status. Now, I should point out, too, that all of the Arab states have already come out and said we're not taking any of them because that's going to be bad for us. They're pretty based over there, Arab level based. They don't mince any words. I've shown some clips here before. And they're saying, no, we're not doing it. I think this would be a very dangerous step. If we were to do something like this, it would have to be very carefully managed. We'd have to be incredibly vigilant as to who we're letting in and who we're not letting in, because it's a very mixed bag. But here we go. Immigration Minister Mark Miller says the immigration status and supports available for evacuees who escape from Gaza Strip will have to be determined based on individual circumstances once people make their way to Canada. The federal government has been working to secure the safe passage of more than 400 people with connections to Canada as part of ongoing negotiations between Israel and Egypt that are being mediated by Qatar. The slow trickle of people allowed through the highly controlled Rafah border crossing has so far included 75 people on Canada's list of anticipated evacuees, and they're only allowed to remain in Egypt for 72 hours. The list includes Canadian citizens and permanent residents, as well as the eligible family members who don't have immigration status in Canada. Global Affairs Canada says it is also aware of reports that 4 Canadian citizens got out with the help of a third party. Miller says family members without Canadian citizenship or permanent residency status will be offered temporary status so they can remain in Canada, and if they need worker permits, his department will work on that as well. So this sounds like a bunch of Joseph Boyles coming in here. Is it Joseph Boyle? Anyway, Boyle, that jihadi from Canada who went to Afghanistan. Well, I don't think he's originally from Canada, but he went to Afghanistan to go backpacking in the mountains with his family while the war in Afghanistan was on. He had 2 kids while he was while he was a quote unquote captive of the Taliban. Fathered 2 kids while they were there, and then was warmly welcomed back to Canada and did a photo op with the Prime Minister as soon as he got back with Justin Trudeau. So yeah, that is I think a signal that our elites are in bed with our enemies. They've betrayed us, and it doesn't matter which enemy. It could be the communists or it could be the jihadis. Any enemy will do. So back to the article. So this is Miller's quote, "I think it's something we'll tackle as the case may be," close quote. He said in an interview Monday. As for the settlement services and income support, Miller said new arrivals from Gaza will be dependent on their Canadian families. The immigration department will assess their needs from there. Quote, "We'll have to look at what that means and look at the volume," close quote, he said. Quote, "I don't know the financial situation of a lot of people leaving. I can't suspect that it's great, but I don't presume people don't have funds either," close quote. Well, that's a meaningless statement. The Gaza Strip has been under almost constant bombardment since Israel launched a retaliatory attack on Hamas for the October 7th incursion that killed 1,400 Israelis. Notice how it says incursion instead of massacre. Another 240 were taken from Israel to Gaza by the armed militant group. The number of Palestinians killed in the war passes 10,500, including more than 4,300 children, the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza said on Wednesday. So we're taking Hamas's word for it, that it's been 10,500, including more than 4,300 children. And, you know, I do expect that there will be more casualties on the Gazan side than there have been on the Israeli side. This idea of proportionality, I think, is ridiculous and probably part of the progressive propaganda. Wars aren't supposed to be proportional. They're supposed to be overwhelming. You got to stamp out that barbarism in order to minimize harm over the long term. Back to the article. For now, while the border remains completely closed to most of the 2.3 million residents in the occupied territory, Canadian immigration officials have not yet turned their mind to the possibility of welcoming refugees from the region. Quote, "There are a number of security considerations and policy considerations that are compelling us to focus on Canadians. We want to get Canadians out," close quote, Miller said. But he added that Canada will be humane if people manage to escape the war and flee its borders. Miller said that once Canadians are out of Gaza, the next consideration will be whether the government needs to find a way to get Canadians out of neighboring Lebanon. Lebanon is a relatively safe country in the Middle East, relatively being the operative word. We don't take refugees from Lebanon. Back to the article. Israeli troops and Hezbollah militants and their allies have been clashing for a month along the Israeli-Lebanon border since the start of the war. Quote, "This is the next set of considerations that I hope does not come to fruition because that means that the conflict has escalated," close quote, Miller said. So, yeah, they are looking at bringing untold numbers of these people here. Okay, here is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. This is some hope, I think, I guess. Here is Justin Trudeau. His tweet says, I got my COVID-19 booster and the flu shot this morning. You should get yours too. To find out how and where you could get your shot, click here. And here he getting his shot.
Here we go. Hold up.
There's no shot.
Here we go.
Anyway, this video. And he's wearing a t-shirt that says vaccines, what is it? Vaccines cause adults. As if he's an adult.
Thank you so much, as always.
Okay. And Maxime Bernier is tweeting this out. He says, this reminded me that you're a fascist psychopath. Thank you, Maxime Bernier. I do appreciate your candor. Yeah. So, yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, didn't we ban AstraZeneca? And, you know, weren't there all kinds of problems? Like, we've acknowledged all of these problems. Health Canada recently acknowledged that the vaccines were contaminated with plasmic DNA, cancer-causing plasmic DNA, and all this kind of stuff. So, and he's still out there shilling for big pharma, keeping his real base, his true investors and donors happy. So here's somebody saying, thank you, Max. Call a spade, or rather a fascist psychopath, a fascist psychopath. So yeah, that's where it's at. Okay. Oh, this looks like this is another article from the New York Times, but it's behind a paywall. New light on origins of Ashkenazis in Europe. Okay, and we're all the way back around. I was just going to take a look and see if maybe we should dive into that Breitbart article. IDF discovers Hamas tunnel under child's bed in Gaza. So this is the kind of thing that they get up to. The Israeli military is currently trying to find and destroy every Hamas tunnel it can in Gaza, including one found underneath a child's bed. The Times of Israel reported, and you know, you can put that lens over it, take it for what it's worth. This is the Times of Israel. Moments after the Times of Israel arrived in the area deep in the northern Gaza Strip this week, troops of the Israel Defense Forces Combat Engineering Corps found an opening to yet another tunnel belonging to the Hamas terror group, the 91st found in the area since Israel's ground operations began. So they found 91 of these tunnel entrances. I've shown a few videos of them here before as well. The entry points are around hospitals and that kind of thing. Back to the article. What set it apart, though, was its location. The shaft had been uncovered by soldiers of the Combat Engineering Corps 614th Battalion as they carried out a second round of sweeps in a single-family home with an outdoor swimming pool in an upscale beachside neighborhood. Inside a bedroom scattered with brightly colored clothes underneath one of 3 child-sized beds, soldiers had found a portal to where monsters were hiding. As Breitbart News has reported, the IDF has been working slowly and methodically to locate tunnels using ground-penetrating radar and other technology. It prefers to destroy the tunnels rather than sending troops into them due to the possibility of booby traps. So that's why they drop the bombs, like bunker busters and stuff like that, is because they're trying to minimize casualties on their side, first and foremost. You know, Hamas is trying to maximize casualties when they do that. So Israel, this has been going on for years and years and years. Israel will, you know, warn people to get out of the area, and Hamas will tell them to come into the hospital that it's about to be bombed so they can be murdered. And they do a lot of the time, I'm afraid. Back to the article. The tunnels are a threat to the soldiers because occasionally Hamas terrorists emerge to fight, but the IDF believes many Hamas terrorists are simply hiding underground, playing for time as the troops slowly close in. And that's by Joel Pollack of Breitbart News. So that concludes our broadcast for today, folks. And I'll just bring you back to Sam Harris's quote. He says, pretending to know things you do not know is the lifeblood of religion. Take note of that, 9/11 conspiracy theorists. So I think that a lot of folks are pretending to know things that they don't out there. They don't have sufficient evidence to support these extraordinary claims that they make. It's, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and I'm afraid that they just have not met the threshold for the Zionist conspiracy running the world, running false flags in America, namely 9/11, in order to drive us to war. It's pretty absurd on its face, really. And even though I embarrassingly, once upon a time, did believe those things for a couple of years during the 2000s. Like I said, they just don't hold up to scrutiny. I mean, if they were going to do a false flag to get us to go to war in Afghanistan and Iraq, why was it a frame up of a bunch of Saudis and Egyptians? That on its face should hopefully make you think twice. And there are all kinds of other problems with that narrative as well. So please, 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 everybody out there in the freedom movement, be a little more critically minded when you're assessing some of these narratives out there. And D Knight on 87 over at Rumble is saying, Sam Harris, that goof. Yeah, he is a goof now. Once upon a time, prior to the fourth turning, I found him to be very, I thought he was very, very rational. But now he has Trump derangement syndrome. It's a real thing. I think maybe he needs some Donald Trump branded butt slav to soothe his aching bum. Nobody's nerfed, guys. Like Sam Harris is just human as well. But he has done some great work, and I have thoroughly enjoyed his writing, his books over the years. I think I've read them all, and they're quite excellent. Actually, it's only since Donald Trump came into the presidency that he completely fell apart. And we see where his biases lie, right? Same with Ezra Levant. I mean, I think that Ezra Levant has done some great work over the last several years since Rebel Media first came on the scene in 2015. I've been following them that long, and I found their work to be really good. But we're starting to see under the pressure where these biases lie. So I'll do my best to highlight that as we move forward. All right, I'll throw to a couple of comments before I sign off here. Colleen says, thank you, Jeff, and glad you are back. Thanks, Colleen. It is good to be back. If I don't get some of this commentary and these ideas out there, then they're just going to kind of burn me up. Even though I do need to take time here and there to, focus on some of my own stuff. But yeah, I'm just going to keep doing this. And on the bright side, a little bit of news. Like I have said before that I was going to work on monetization and hopefully supplement my income when I was just on my CAF pension and stuff like that. But I did get my some of my benefits approved there recently. That was something else that I was working on, going through Veterans Affairs, and so I think I'm being taken care of fairly well. I got some new benefits approved through them, and that is having a pretty positive impact on my income. And it's not really necessary, I don't think, for me to monetize what I'm doing here. I'm happy to do it, and if I were to do that, then I would just have to report all my income to them anyway. So then things would kind of get complex and probably more pain than it was worth. Anyway, so I think I'm just going to keep doing this on a more or less volunteer basis, not to discourage anybody from, I don't know, maybe leaving a tip for a coffee or something like that. I can probably get away with that, but I don't think it's going to be necessary for me to seek monetization. And Cora is saying, thanks again, Jeff. Really needed this with all of the wonderful friends here. Hope everyone has a positive day and a restful weekend, and you as well. I really do hope to have a positive day and a restful weekend. And Cindy is saying, thanks, Jeff. As always, much love. Enjoy your birthday gift. I think I will do that. Enjoy my birthday gift over this weekend. And I do find that it is helpful. And Evelyn is saying, take care all. Colleen says, oh yes, happy birthday. I hope you get spoiled. Well, it's not my birthday yet, guys. My birthday is next week. So I guess I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be 45, for crying out loud. But hey, not bad for an old guy, right? Check that out, right? I'm still hanging in there, and everybody say happy birthday, but it's not quite my birthday yet. It's just that Cindy's birthday gift got here a little bit early for me. It was very thoughtful. Again, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Cindy, not me. And Robin is saying, Sam Harris is not someone I give much credit to. I don't anymore. I don't anymore. I don't think that his commentary in probably the last 7 or 8 years has been very valuable at all. It's just Trump derangement syndrome. But prior to that, like if you go back and you look at what he did before that, it was really good. And AOG says, Israel runs the world. If you defend Israel, you're defending your own enslavement. Rothschild, Satanists, Sonus. Yeah, no, they don't. I don't believe any of that stuff. I used to think that way when it comes to the bankers and the Rothschilds and, the lead up to the Second World War. And there are all kinds of problems with this narrative. Like, people will say that the bankers got rich off the First World War and then drove us back to an even bigger war in the Second World War so they can make even more money. Well, if that's the case, then why didn't World War III come immediately after that? Why did it go World War I, World War II, which was bigger, and then Korea? They should have continued to get bigger. If it was all about making the wealthy even wealthier, then they would have continued to drive us to bigger and more profitable wars. But that's not what happened. The wars got smaller for quite a while. So that's another one of these things that I find is problematic in terms of the logic. It doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Once you just kind of think twice about it, you'll see that it doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. And Gary Kumper over on Rumble is saying, lest we forget. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. It is Remembrance Day tomorrow, so I'm going to get out there and participate in a parade. I'll be staying away from the Legion because I don't support it, which makes me kind of sad because I always look forward to just being a veteran in my local community and hanging out at the Legion and maybe being that old guy telling the young guys some stories of, my adventures during the wars and things like that, because that's what I used to do. I really liked Remembrance Day when I was a young soldier, airman, and on Remembrance Day, I look forward to going to the Legion and hearing some stories from the old guys and getting blitzed and probably doing something I regret later on in the evening. But that's what it was kind of all about. It was just a day to hang out, and it's a culture, military culture, and it's a pretty great one. So at least it has been until the military went woke. Now it's terrible. So anyway, it's disappointing that I won't be able to do that, but I think I'll probably just head down to the base and have a few drinks with the younger generation that are currently serving, because that's what I did last time. So anyway, lest we forget, guys, and please get out there and show your support for veterans tomorrow. It's Remembrance Day, so it is a very sacred, hallowed day. It's unfortunate that it's not as well respected as it was prior to the fourth turning, but the fourth turning has a beginning and an end. So the current state of affairs is temporary. And there's two things I used to tell the troops when the chips were down. And that is, number one, it's only temporary. And number two, it can always get worse. So whatever you do, don't make it worse. All right, guys, that's it for me today. And until next time, stay frosty and stay safe out there.